Jack Weber for a beautiful piano introduction. Welcome everybody, I'm Steve Stolee. I'm a longtime friend of Bob Cederwall, and on behalf of Denise and the Cederwall family and the Harris family and all of their extended satellites, many of who have come here from out of town, I'd like to welcome you to this celebration of life for Bob Cederwall, our dear citizen of Bainbridge Island and wonderful human being. He obviously inspired a lot of people, because I have a feeling that this would have been an even bigger crowd if not for certain other things happening. In fact, it's been said over and over in the last couple of weeks that if Bob were alive, he wouldn't be here today. So you'll have to raise your hand if you want anybody to give you the score, or you're taping the show. But we're all aware. So we're going to celebrate this life rather than mourn the passing, which is all we've got. And Bob meant so much to all of us. It's going to leave a big hole here on Bainbridge Island. There's a lot of things that just aren't going to get done. And so I guess we're all going to have to pick up the slack a little bit, maybe try a little bit more kindness. Bob was known for that. And so we're going to start today with a video tribute that's composed of a great deal of history of Bainbridge Island, the Cederwall family, the Harris families, and everything else to boot. So maybe this will be a good way to start things off. Or yet.
Nope, 13 Seahawks.
13? There you go, Bob. I did forget to give you a warning about power outages, and you all saw what it was like to come down here, and we do have the possibility of power outage here today. So if that should happen, we're going to continue as if it didn't, for a little while at least, and see if power is restored. If not, we will lead an orderly progression of the building so that everybody stays safe. But just be forewarned, we're not expecting anything like that. It tickled us a lot last night, especially me. I was up late working on this, and believe me, I felt the presence of Bob helping me out there. The power shut off no less than 4 times and shut my computer down each time. But it always came back. Thank you, Bob. So we're going to continue with some remembrances and share some stories about Bob. And starting it off is Susie Burdick, and following her will be Rick Cederwall.
Nice job on the video. As Steve said, my name is Susie, and Bobby was my friend. I'd like to think he's looking down at us today, but in reality, I suspect that he's taping us and watching the game. I met Bob and Denise 30-some years ago when we started doing shows together here. Well, not here yet. First it was tents and the high school and the storefront theater, and finally it was here. I loved working with both of them, so much that I rarely did a show without them somehow involved. Bob was a director's dream on stage and off stage. He would try anything, absolutely anything, no matter how ludicrous the request. He'd get this mischievous look on his face that was engaging and exciting and scary, but he would do it, whatever it was. I loved watching him transform into characters. The greaser that you saw was a little too easy for Bob. I had a hard time getting him out of character. Everything from that to being part of a 3-headed dragon, Lullaby for Tomorrow, our first Russian adventure with Peter and Fast Eddie. Bob, long beyond the productions, Bob remained like my big brother. I trusted him, I knew he had my back. At every encounter, bar none, started with, "Yo, baby," and a big hug. And I thought, what a great way to greet people. Bob was a good man, he was an exceptional friend. And as we all know, We felt that friendship. We felt to our core that he loved us and supported us and was there for us. He was one of the best friends that a lot of us have ever had. We can carry that with us. Denise, you need to know that we all love you dearly and are here for you. And we will hold you and Bobby in our hearts forever.
Hi, I'm Bob's older brother, so I had the blessing of knowing Bob the longest. And I want to share with you some of our early days on Bainbridge Island. Give you an idea how Bainbridge Bob got connected with Bainbridge. And thank you, Steve. So all the wonderful pictures you saw up there of us when we were kids, that really gives you an idea of what an idyllic time it was. So Bob was born in Seattle and lived in the Magnolia neighborhood. Bob first came to Bainbridge in the summer of 1948 when he was still in his terrible twos. Eric's family had found a summer cabin to rent for the summer at Agate Point and invited our family to come along. So we piled 4 adults and 5 kids into this tiny little summer cabin. The bad news was that the summer of 1948 was one of those cool, wet summers all summer long. So they were constantly clothes being dried on the wire screen in front of the fire. And I'm sure the mothers were secretly saying to each other, why did we volunteer for this experiment this summer? But for us kids, well, it was a grand adventure. Playing in the woods, playing down at the beach, curling up every night in our little sleeping bags in the living room. It was great. Well, the good news is our folks decided to try it again another summer, only that time we rented another place nearby so there was more room for us all. And we were treated to one of those gorgeous Bainbridge summers. And the hook was set. The adults were in, and so were us kids. So we spent several more summers this way. For us kids, much of the time was spent around the water. We were on the water in boats. We were above the water on the old county dock at Agate Point that used to serve the mosquito fleet. We spent hours up there dropping our lines down to see what we could catch and bring home. Of course, our mothers looked at that fish and said, "Are you kidding me?" Our families each had 16-foot Rhinell boats with little cabins and 3-horsepower inboard motors. We called them putt-putts. And this was before the time of the bridge, so we would go to Paul's boat, these boats, and we'd time it with the tides so we could get through the pass and get to Paul's boat because the boats wouldn't make it otherwise. And when we were suddenly gathered up, because the tide had changed, it was outgoing, it was time to leave to catch the tide. It was always the worst Bob. We had to look around for Bob because he was always out exploring Paul's boat. Typical Bob. There were 10 of us kids around there in that neighborhood, and we called ourselves the Coyote Kids. We ranged in age of 10 years, with Bob being the youngest. Note that Eric is 12 days older than Bob. So to gain full status in the Coyote Kids, you had to climb up to the Coyote Kid treehouse. Now finally I made it up there, and I'm sure when Bob was watching me, he said, "How hard can that be?" So it wasn't too much longer before he managed to shinny and pull himself up to that treehouse. And as we saw in the video, Bob later on in life took tree climbing to a whole new level. The Coyote Kids used to put on plays in the summers. Our stage was a space between 2 tall cedars with bed sheets strung on a rope between the 2 trees. One summer, Bob and Eric had a leading role in A Bicycle Built for Two. You had Eric dressed in a plaid shirt and his dad's hat, and you had Bob dressed in a makeshift dress and this little scarf wrapped around his head. And they were seated on a sawhorse as we sung the tune. They received rave reviews from the parents present. And I say, this is where Bob launched his acting career. When he went to Santa Rosa City College after high school, he focused on theater, so it really was in his blood for a long time. I mentioned Bob and Eric. They were quite a pair, really double trouble. Bob and Eric became a word. Have you seen Bob and Eric? Or Bob and Eric, ready to go. One time, a neighbor found a little extra painting on the side of his house. Must have been Bob and Eric. After a few summers, we bought a local piece of waterfront property right next to where Mary Braden lives. And we built 2 summer cabins side by side. But it was really clear that we wanted to live there year-round, and so we expanded them to year-round living and moved over to Bainbridge full-time in 1955. Bob and Eric entered as part of the first 5th grade class at Captain Wilkes. And the rest of Bainbridge history is what you know. I want to end with a Swedish word, skrappakaka. I understand that it means a dish made on the fly from leftovers, not by a recipe, and often very tasty. This Swedish word is also used to describe the youngest in a family. Our dad was the youngest of 6 kids, and we remember hearing our grandmother refer to him as skrappakaka. Well, Bob was the youngest of 3, and he too was skrappakaka, and I have to say he really lived up to the name. Think about it. He didn't live life by a recipe. He just made it up as he went along. And indeed, he created quite a dish of his life that we all enjoyed so much. Well done, Brother Bob.
Things that Bob loved in his life. We're going to do some music. Bob was a member of this ensemble here, the side-by-side singers for, I think, since its inception. And it was one of his favorite things, and they're going to sing one of his favorite songs, Anyone Can Whistle by Stephen Sondheim.
Anyone can whistle, that's what they say, easy. Anyone can whistle, any old day, easy. It's all so simple, relax, let go, let fly. So someone tell me why can't I can dance a tango, I can read Greek, easy. I can say a dragon any old week, easy. What's hard is simple, what's natural comes hard. Maybe you could show me how to let go, lower my guard, learn to be free. Maybe if you whistle, whistle for me. What's hard is simple, what's natural comes hard. Maybe if you show me how to let go, lower my guard, learn to be free. Maybe if you whistle, whistle for me. Whistle for me.
Continue with some more stories here. So the next one you'll hear is Jeff Miller, and after that, Misha Jerkovsky.
Can everybody hear me all right? Robert Cederwall. Ann and I call it Bob, because that's what he always pronounced it. So Bob's on the phone. We're going to go over to Bob and Denise's. So many things come to mind as a result of really knowing Bob for only about 10 years. From his beginning as a young man, I think he could have gone down many paths, including Romulus. Ultimately, Bob managed to make great choices in life and make an amazing name for himself, an amazing group of friends. Certainly one of the best choices he ever made was Denise. Though he was shaped by many, Bob, I think, was truly a self-made man in the strictest sense of the word. Someone who, someone there must dislike Bob, but I've never met them. Always had something good to say, always elevated the spirit of everyone around him, always looking for a good time. You know, the minute Bob would walk in the house, things would light up. The consummate bargainer, as we all know, and barterer, always some kind of deal in the works, you know. He'd come over and say, oh, I've got this deal going with, you know, so-and-so. A look around his shop, I think, reveals the inner Bob. Things he had amassed planning to barter or sell. Treasures of past jobs, projects to be attempted. The dream of selling, excuse me, slabs of wood. Maybe a drive to California in a truck full of slabs of wood. A guy's guy always made me feel like I was special, and I'm a little bit disappointed to find out that, gee, he made everybody feel special. We shared a number of jokes, inside jokes, that just he and I, I'm sure that's what everybody here thinks too. And actually they're more like threads of conversations that would sort of come up and reoccur over and over. We could sit at the end of the table of people for hours and just joke back and forth, and often did. An example of one of these threads is we met Bob and Denise first on the trip to Egypt, and I'll attribute this to King Tut's tomb, though I can't honestly remember. It makes a better story if it was King Tut's tomb, so bear with it for that. So we're walking through this tomb, being guided along, and I'm just kind of dragging behind, looking at the hieroglyphs and all this sort of stuff, and I look into this one chamber, and Bob's in there by himself, right, doing this. Literally mimicking, you know, and he sees me. I watched him, I don't know, right, for 30 seconds or something. He sees me and he goes, I know, like that. And I said, I know you know. He says, I know you know I know. And that back and forth happened with us all the time. Somebody would say something, or he'd say something, go, I know, like that. Just start off down that path. The main story I wanted to share, however, is my next favorite Bob story. Unfortunately, my favorite is too long by a factor of about 5, but if anybody wants to hear it after this, I'd be delighted to tell it because it's truly very funny. And also, I want to warn everybody in the audience, particularly if you have young children, you may want to cover their ears. Every time I've told this story, the women have found it truly disgusting, and the men have found it really cool. So last year at the playoffs, it was actually just about the same time. I can't remember, it was before we played Atlanta. It was when we played Washington. We had some people over to the house and to watch the game, and Bob and Denise were coming over, and I didn't know what to do. I'm from Kansas, so food is not as exotic for me as it is for others. And so I decided that I would make con queso, right? You get a block of, Velveeta and heat it up, put the rotel in it, and you're good to go, right? Bob gets there, and he's like truly disgusted. He's brought a place of salmon, and all this sort of stuff, and I've got con queso. Anyway, by the end of the game, the con queso was all gone. So along comes the next, I guess it was the game against Atlanta. No, it was the Super Bowl. We're going over to the Bryants. I say, I'm doing the con queso again. I don't care what anybody says, So we head over there. Anne's got the con queso on the floor of the car between her feet. And I don't know if it was a turn or stop or whatever. Anyway, the con queso dumps on the floor. Some of it, not all of it. So we get there, and there's con queso down the side of the bowl and all this sort of stuff. We walk into the Bryant's looking for some place to, clean this stuff up. And Bob says, what happened? I said, oh, we, dumped some of this on the floor of the car. And he goes, really? Yeah. He says, he grabs a handful of chips. And I grabbed a handful of chips. We went out and feasted on it. When the little, this is the part that grosses everybody out. Right to when you start getting those little tiny needles in it. So as they said, they stole my line earlier. I wanted to say I prefer to think of Bob as not gone, just simply up a tree and can't come to the phone just now.
Matthew 18. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, Verily, I say unto you, unless you be converted, and become as little children, you shall not enter in the kingdom of heaven. Every time I read this verse, I cannot help it but think of Bob. I do not remember Bob sad. I do not remember Bob angry. I do not remember Bob upset. I can only remember Bob joyful. His ability to experience a childlike joy in virtually any circumstances has always seemed amazing to me. Those of you who saw him perform Linus and You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, know exactly what I'm talking about. That is not to say that Bob's circumstances provided for trouble-free life. Not at all. But the tree that never had to fight for sun and sky and air and light, but stood out in the open plain and always got its share of rain, never became the forest king, but lived and died a scrubby thing. The man who never had to toil to gain and farm his patch of soil, who never had to win his share of sun and sky and light and air, never became a manly man, but lived and died as he began. Good timber does not grow with ease. The stronger wind, the stronger trees. The further sky, the greater length. The more the storm, the more the strength. By sun and cloud, by rain and snow, the trees and men good timbers grow. Where thickest lies the forest growth, we find the patriarchs of both. And they hold counsel with the stars, whose broken branches show the scars of many winds and much of strife. This is the common law of life. But what made Bob such a special father, husband, brother, friend was not his ability to experience the joy under any circumstances, but his willingness to share the joy with anyone around him. All of us have been on the receiving end of that, and now we all have to pass that joy forward. Even if we do that just a little bit at a time, because there are so many of us here, that would make for the best memorial for our friend, Bob from Bainbridge.
And now let's listen to another favorite song of Bob's. Someone who liked to move around a bit. Route 66, side by side on song. Incidentally, accompanying on piano is Evie Staten. Side by side. We're going to follow that with a couple of stories that involve Bob with a sense of travel, both figurative and literal. And next up is Ron Antinoja and Sean Whitney.
Hear me? Bob Cederwall was like a brother to me. I've known Bob for 31 years, nearly half my life. We met because we married cousins. My wife Margot and Bob's wife Denise were crib mates and best friends. Their mothers were best friends too. Not long after meeting, Bob and I discovered a mutual interest, a love of baseball. In 1987, we flew down to Arizona to watch my San Francisco Giants and Bob's Seattle Mariners play spring training baseball. This trip was the beginning of a 5-day annual ritual for Bob and I. It lasted 15 years, through to 2001. Admittedly, these trips were more than just baseball. We called them sports weekends. We timed them to coincide with March Madness, the college basketball tournament. A typical day started with breakfast at a local sports bar when the first basketball games began. The first baseball games began about noon or 1 o'clock, but we had to be at the stadium an hour or so before in order to get tickets. Bob was a phenomenal negotiator with the scalpers. He bargained, he bluffed, he walked away, and at just the right moment, he pulled the trigger. We usually end up sitting right behind home plate or a few rows behind the dugout. Clearly, money was no object on sports weekends. After the game, it was back to the sports bar to eat and watch more basketball. On some nights, there were a night game, so we'd go to another baseball game. Always, there were more basketball games. Often, when there were no games left to watch on television, we'd catch a movie, or maybe a double feature. Then it was back to our hotel to sleep, get up, shower, and repeat 4 more times. I must clarify what I meant by sports bar. On that first trip, the guy at the hotel's front desk suggested a sports bar a couple blocks away called Hooters. This was prophetic because when the basketball game went to commercial, we had to find something fun to look at. Hooters fit that bill perfectly. After a few years, we had visited all 13 of the Arizona Grapefruit League stadiums. Naturally, our next dream was to visit all the Major League stadiums. So we broke the 30 Major League teams up into 4 groups of 7 or 8 teams. 1 trip for each of those 4. The distance between the stadiums was now larger, so that meant hours of Bob driving and me navigating. Sometimes I entertained us by reading out loud from a local history book. Bob swears that he enjoyed that too. I was never sure of that. We only accomplished 3 of those 4 trips in 98, 99, 2000. You see, there was something else going on those hot afternoons in the desert sun. As I recorded every pitch of every game in my scorebook, Bob and I talked in great detail about the oddities of baseball. For example, we might notice that a pitcher repeatedly used breaking balls away to set up his strikeout pitch, a fastball on the inside corner. It was during these discussions, sweating in the hot sun with Bob Cederwall, where my theories were developed. The theories upon which I based a software company that I formed in 2000. Tendu served the Major League teams by providing them advanced data and analysis tools that the coaches and players used to prepare for games. But I didn't realize the pivotal role that Bob played in my dream until a couple of weeks ago, as I was preparing this talk for you today. What if he had not agreed and not encouraged me to spend all that time in the desert? What if he hadn't been such a fantastic sounding board for my ideas? I may not have taken the opportunity to pursue the most important work of my life. We don't get advance warning for this stuff. I didn't get to tell him what it meant to me.
Hello everybody, my name is Sean, I'm Bob's son, and I just wanted to start by thanking everybody for doing everything they've done since his passing. There's just so many people I can't even start with who to thank, but you all know who you are, and thank you so very much for just being such wonderful people in my father's life. I just got just one funny story I was going to share with you. I love to go fishing with my father up in Alaska, and this one particular trip was a pretty nasty day, and we fished in a little 14-foot aluminum skiff. So if you're bouncing around in Alaska and 4 to 5 foot waves, things can get a little hairy. So we're out there trolling one morning, and I just happened to nail a really nice one, and about 2 seconds later, my dad's pole hit, right? So I've got a fish on, and Dad has one on, and my father's really not much of a fisherman. And his patience wears kind of thin sometimes, so as everybody's does. But this one particular, he's the only person that I know that would have a 20-pounder on his line and say, "God damn it, I got one!" and he did, because he was pissed because he had to drive the boat and try to deal with this pole at the same time. And I had a fish on my line too, so we were, yelling at each other pretty bad. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. I thought that was one of the best times of my life, was going fishing with my father. But yeah, he's the only one that would just be pissed off about having a 20-pounder on his back of his line. So anyway, thank you all for doing what you've done. I appreciate it.
Next, we're going to have another musical number. This is from the show Wicked. It's called For Good. We have Tanya Rowe, Roselle Colbegger, and Jenny Lynn Hawkins to do the trio.
I've heard it said that people come into your life for a reason, bringing something we must learn, and we are led by those who help us most grow if we let them, and we help them in return. Well, I don't know if I believe it's true, but I know I'm who I am today because I knew you. Like a comet pulled from orbit as it passes the sun, like a stream that meets a boulder halfway through the wood. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? Because I knew I have been changed for good. It will be that we will never meet again in this lifetime. So let me say before we part, so much of me is made of what I learned from you. You will be with me, like a handprint on my heart. say if I've been changed for the better. I do believe I have been changed for the better. And because I knew you, because I knew you, because I knew you, I have been changed.
We have another story, another pair of stories here. First from Jim Stanger, and then from Dominique Cantwell.
Hello, I'm Jim Stanger. I'm Denise's younger brother. It is true. Anyway, I first met Bob 30 plus years ago when Denise brought him by a little house I was, funky old cabin I was living in on Queen Point. And as soon as they arrived, Bob, with that just endearing, great smile, started to give me histories, not only of my neighbors' homes, but also my house, and especially this huge weeping willow that clung precariously to the high bank in my yard. And it was at that first meeting that he gave me kind of an island cred, made me feel at home and local. And he kept that connection for me all these years, even after I moved off the island. And whenever I visited for work, or for fun, or just for a dinner, he kept that island connection alive and dear to me. One thing that Bob and I share is a love for cooking. I've been a professional cook and caterer for many years, but I always marvel at Bob's ease in the kitchen. Whether he was doing a fancy, lavish dinner for friends or just a small meal for the three of us, just seemed at ease and enjoyed his time in the kitchen. He'd start in the afternoon, starting doing prep, and then he'd wander off, get in his truck, drive away. And he's looking at a tree job, or he'd just forgotten something at the market. He'd drive off, come back, work a little bit more in the kitchen, start a fire, get the house warm, maybe mow the lawn, or get back in his truck and drive off again. That's where you see this white truck on the highway going someplace, going anywhere and everywhere. But when the guests arrived, all was ready, that warm, generous, smiling host who took care of you was there, made sure you were comfortable, had what you needed, a drink, appetizers, or just conversation. The afternoon of the day that Bob passed, our family was gathered in the living room. And my sister Celeste had actually managed a decent fire, and we were all kind of wrapped up in our own thoughts. And Ron, cousin Ron, looked up with a sad smile on his face and said, "I'm waiting for Bob to bring me my glass of water." And that really said it all, that Bob took care of us in small ways and in large ways, our family, friends, and the community. A friend of mine said it was like a thread that ran through the island, but I think he was more of a strong cord, one that tightened the community, pulled together a diverse group of friends, and ultimately strengthened our family. In all the ways that I will miss him, I think the hardest will be just not passing him on the highway, seeing him going the other way in his truck, and knowing that there's a fire at home, and he'll be there to take care of us.
16, more than 0. I'm not a superstitious person, but when I first came to Bainbridge Performing Arts, I heard rumors about unexpected happenings around the theater, footsteps in the hallways, the sound of phantom closing doors, and I couldn't help but roll my eyes at the thought of a theater ghost. But once I started becoming the first one in the mornings, I started to experience the phenomena for myself. I have to tell you, it's awfully quiet in the theater at 8 a.m. after a show night. But every now and then I'd catch a draft, as though there were an open door. The tables would be more neatly stacked than they'd been the night before, or there'd be water in a sink and glasses clinking in the kitchen with not a soul around. Room by room, I'd rule out the possibility of an intruder, check the locks, and offer a nervous good morning into the darkness to the ghost that I did not believe in. Now, every few days, Bob would stop in early to visit me in the office. Sometimes he'd bring coffee on a morning when he knew we'd be powering through to a board meeting that night. Sometimes just a warning to keep an eye on the gutters, but always good humor and good company. He was our facilities chair, so we would tick off items on our to-do list as he'd regale me of stories of Susie and Bart and the good old days of BPA. One especially early morning, about a week before he passed away, I heard footsteps backstage and geared up, only to have Bob walk in a moment later. I said how relieved I was to see him, that I was beginning to believe the place really was haunted. What do you mean, he asked. And as I was explaining the odd happenings, he bent over with laughter and wiped tears from his eyes. That's me, he laughed. What? I come in every day just to check on the place, make sure the roof's not leaking, see that you're okay. He didn't always come up and say hello because he knew I had work to do. He said, "You're on my rounds, kiddo." And that was Bob, always thinking of others, so often unseen, asking nothing for his kindness, but always looking over those he loved. And I think he really loved this place. As Tel Schreiber said, Bob would do just about anything to be on stage, even take his clothes off. And he did. He loved sharing this stage with Denise, rigging scenery, and perhaps more than anything, gathering all of you to share in his joy. Few give more of themselves than Bob did. Few inspire and mentor in the ways that he did. And no one could pack a house for a show like Bob could. He would have loved this. Each year, BPA honors an individual or individuals who demonstrate exemplary service, generosity, and support through volunteerism with our Angel Award. Many past recipients of the award are here today. I think it's fitting that we announce its rededication as the Cederwall Award. In life, apparently, he was our ghost. Now he is, as he has always been, our angel.
Go Hawks. Next up, we have an island treasure poet. And Bob McAllister is going to read us the eulogy for Bob Cederwall. The past scores the present like growth rings in a tree. With a nudge of neuron and a blink of synapse, we can visit events from a year ago or eons past. Through memory and imagination, we can sit down to pancakes with our parents at a Saturday morning breakfast, in a flash visit them near the end in a nursing home. We can play tag or swing on a slide again in the 4th grade at recess. Even cosmologically travel the galaxy to the beginning of the Big Bang, 13 billion years ago, when everything we are or will become began. And everything that was there at the beginning is still here. Nothing is destroyed or created, it only changes form. As Tim O'Brien wrote in The Things They Carried, once you're alive, you can't ever be dead. Bob's still here. He's clambered up a Doug fir with a chainsaw swinging from his hip, feet secured in boots and spurs, leapfrogging up the tree, attached by a leather belt. He's singing and dancing 30 years ago as one of the roustabout cowhands in Oklahoma, and everything's up to date in Kansas City. He's driving in this white truck to work with a back bed so full of chainsaws, files, hard hats, gas and oil cans, wedges and splitting balls. It looked like a ragtagel Brobdingnagian rutabaga pod. A month ago or more, he locked his key in the same truck, and he's right here in the back parking lot with a pry bar trying to jimmy the lock. I came upon him and told him I got a sledgehammer in the back of my truck. And he says, no, I'll get it. And somehow he did. He got it. About 20 years ago, I had a 70-foot cedar at Phil Hosterman and Bonnie Wallace's house by Blodell Reserve that needed to come down so we could build a new addition. He showed up in his black pants, black suspenders, and that blue and white work shirt he always wore, asked me what he needed to watch out for, and I told him the bush by the side of the house was a wedding present, a rose bush that had just begun to fry with flower, and Phil and Bonnie didn't want it damaged. Bob looked at the bush, looked at the tree, and said, yeah, I can do that. No calculations, just a pure kind of knowing what was needed. He cut a pie-shaped wedge on one side with a chainsaw about as tall as he was, went to the back and sliced through the edge. He shut off the concussive gas-burping saw. Silence. The tree trembled, then gravity and inclination held sway. It began the long arc toward Earth as we watched. Bonnie had her fist in her mouth. Phil's eyes flicked to the tree, then to the bush, like a protective parent. The tree landed with a whomp that shook the ground. Between the rose bush and tree trunk, maybe 6 inches. Our mouths unfroze in the oh no of catastrophe to the oh of wow. And I looked over at Bob. He dotted an imaginary I with his index finger and said with a smile, I meant to do that. It was a kind of logarithmic magic. Good, you got the joke. He loved the theater. As he said to me one night at Tel Schreiber's house at a meeting of the Manly Men's Film Group, as he put the finishing touches on a sinfully ravishing pasta, meat, veg, garlic casserole, I'm a whore for theater. Come one, come all, I'll be your paramour. Come any part in a play, the Fay Mr. Mel in the plays of the Thing, a weird chorus guy in Shrek, a gambler card sharp in Guys and Dolls, a punctilious obsessive in the Full Monty, a teenage hood with slicked down black hair and a duck's ass in Grease, a Royal Duncan in Macbeth, steadfast Adrian in The Tempest, among others. He took every one of his parts to heart, giving all of his energy and aplomb to the role he played. He never complained. He was just happy to be in the lights on the stage. He embraced every play with a wide-eyed love, born of desire and innocence, with a simple belief that he was part of a story meant for an audience that might forget, for a time, their own troubles. Here's a story we could multiply 684 times, or 1,368, which is double. and still not reached a real number. I know a woman intimately. Full disclosure, my wife Mary, who about 30 years ago, a single mom with a 10-year-old daughter, needed a tree cut down before she could sell her house at Port Madison. Bob arrived, cut the tree, bucked it, stacked the wood, and gave her a bill that was about equal to buying 2 tires at a cut-rate outlet in Gorse. As he was leaving with his check, he looked at the tree swing at the front of the house, suspended by a beam between 2 giant firs, and said, "I better take a look at that." He clambered up the tree, probed the beam, and said, "The beam's rotten. If the kid swings on that, it might fall." Mary agreed. He cut the beam, released its supports, and took off the swing, picked up his equipment, and headed for the truck. Mary said, "How much extra do I owe you?" Bob said, "Nothing." Smiled and left. He did the right thing. It was more important to do something right and good than to make money. I do not believe that we should anoint with sainthood those who have passed before us. Bob lived his life like a swashbuckler. He caroused, imbibed, and was jubilantly raucous. He lived well and was loved. That's a good life. And what of us who knew him and grieve at his absence? There's a muster of peacocks, a leap of leopards, a squawk of chickens, a shiver of sharks, and for Bob, an island of friends. Looking around, we see the diversity. Some lawyers and execs, some in the arts, a herd of prehistoric goats. For a lot of my friends, I mentioned. A brace of construction workers, a strut of actors, and a gaffer's tape of techies, with whom he trod the boards, and finally, the linchpin of Denise. And all of them connected together like a beneficence of blessings to my friend Bob, who climbed trees. How amazing to live a life climbing trees. We remember when young, the adventure, the thrill, to grapple up the trunk toward the sky, to perch among limbs and branches that eternally moved in a sway, a wind we could feel that wasn't of the earth, because we were part of the tree. A sense of meaning as we breathed the smell of sap and felt the brush of needles. Most of us don't climb trees anymore, suspended halfway between heaven and earth. Bob was the eternal kid who climbed them always. Bob was a logger, a compadre, an actor who plays the title character today as he did in The Wizard of Oz. A great guy who learned, along with the reprobate rock star Steven Tyler, that's the most bit of an obscure reference. That the most important thing to do as you get older is to be kind to people. He created and lived this script. The text of the play reveals that kindness and goodness remain, that it won't go away, that it survives beyond mortality. This play concerns something about a friend that we want to go on forever. And it does. So everybody knows that Bob Cederwall had a storied career at BPA here and theater in general. His great love, among other things. But he always had the same audition piece. The only song he ever sang for an audition. And it was very special to him because it was about a logger. It's called If I Only Had a Heart, And here to sing it for us today, Steve Beekler with Chris Colbert on piano.
Denise asked me to sing this song for you, and she told me that Bob always sang this song for every audition, and he sang it a cappella. And according to Bob, he always nailed it. I'm not going to do either one. When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kinda human if I only had a heart. I'd be tender, I'd be gentle, and oh so sentimental. I'd be friends with the sparrow and the boy who shoots the arrow if I only had a heart. Picture me a balcony, above a voice sings low. Wherefore art thou, Romeo? I feel a beat. How sweet, just to register emotion, jealousy, devotion, and really feel a part. I would stay young and chipper, and I'd lock it with a zipper, if I only had a heart.
Steve, I know Bob heard that one. What we're going to do now to finish up the ceremony is a candle ritual, and sort of dreamed this up, but it feels right. So all the members of Bob's family are going to take a candle and light it from the big candle in front and place it in the sand. And that will be the concluding act of our meeting here today, and I want to thank you all again for coming and giving up what you might have had at home to share this with us. And when we leave here, we'll have a little bit more to share about who Bob was, what he meant to us. And if there's a lot more to do because of his leaving us, then we have that challenge ahead of us. So thank you for coming, and I'd like to thank BPA for their generosity in hosting us here. There will be refreshments in the atrium provided by Bainbridge Bakers, and apparently there's going to be a beer toast. Bob was very keen on beer. And I wish you all the very best. Be careful on the highways. Go Seahawks. Also like to mention that Jack Weber will accompany us on piano for this ceremony. loves you.
Oh, really? Oh, really? The green one.